Have you ever dreamed of traveling through the ages to discover the true masters of our planet? How did creatures with gleaming scales manage to conquer all of Earth's environments long before the appearance of mammals or even dinosaurs? Welcome to the incredible saga of reptiles, these extraordinary survivors who have traversed more than 300 million years of history. From the early reptiliomorphs timidly emerging from primordial waters to the impressive crocodiles that still rule our marshes today, and the venomous snakes and lizards with astonishing adaptations. We will dive into the fascinating epic of these masters of adaptation who have conquered burning deserts, lush forests, and deep oceans, thanks to their revolutionary evolutionary innovations. But before embarking on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss a thing. Thank you, and have a nice trip. We all know the simplified story of evolution. Fish gave rise to tetrapods. Tetrapods became amphibians, and amphibians evolved into reptiles. This very simplified version is useful for explaining the essentials, even if it doesn't reflect all the complexity of evolution. In reality, fish, tetrapods, amphibians, and reptiles coexisted for millions of years. Terrestrial vertebrates appeared in the Devonian over 400 million years ago, over 248 million years, in the form of amphibians known as stegocephalians. Closely tied to water bodies, they reproduced exclusively in water and lived near it, where terrestrial vegetation was found. Occupying areas far from water sources required major adaptations: protection against drying out, breathing air, locomotion on solid surfaces, reproduction out of water, and adapted behaviors. These adaptations allowed for the emergence of a new qualitatively distinct animal group. These characteristics were first fully developed in reptiles. Towards the end of the Carboniferous, about 300 million years ago, about 186 million years, significant environmental changes occurred, including climatic diversification, the development of varied vegetation, the expansion of plants far from water bodies, and the widespread distribution of tracheal-breathing arthropods. These, becoming food sources, also spread across watersheds. However, the reptile link is particularly essential for specialists in prehistoric life, because it's from these ancestral reptiles that dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and marine reptiles of the Mesozoic era descended. But what exactly is a reptile? Biologists define reptiles primarily by their ability to lay hard-shelled eggs on land, unlike amphibians, which must lay soft, permeable eggs in water. This characteristic allows reptiles to move away from water for reproduction. In addition, reptiles have scaly or armored skin, which protects them from dehydration, a beneficial adaptation for terrestrial life. Compared to amphibians, reptiles also have more developed and muscular limbs, a slightly larger brain, and more efficient lungs for respiration. Though, unlike mammals, they do not have a diaphragm, an innovation that appeared later in evolution. These adaptations allowed them to conquer various environments and become the ancestors of the fascinating groups that include dinosaurs and other giant reptiles of the past. About 320 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, Earth presented favorable conditions that shaped the evolution of life, notably the emergence of the first reptiles. Indeed, the Carboniferous is marked by an initially warm and humid climate that favored the expansion of vast tropical forests. Average temperatures were around 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees, creating ideal conditions for lush vegetation. This abundant plant life led to a significant increase in atmospheric oxygen concentration, reaching up to 35%, well above the current 21%. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide levels were high at the beginning of the Carboniferous, estimated at 1,500 parts per million, or almost 4 times today's levels, contributing to a pronounced greenhouse effect and higher global temperatures. During this time, land masses were in constant motion, gradually coming together to form the supercontinent Pangaea. This tectonic process led to the formation of major mountain chains such as the Hercynian Range, whose weathering contributed to a decrease in atmospheric CO2. This reduction in CO2 initiated a gradual climate cooling, leading to the Carboniferous glaciation. On the other hand, the warm and humid conditions of the early Carboniferous allowed the development of vast swamps and forests, notably of giant tree-like ferns. The incomplete decomposition of this dense vegetation, due to the absence of efficient lignin decomposers, led to the formation of thick coal deposits, hence the name Carboniferous. These vegetation-rich environments also favored the evolution and diversification of terrestrial fauna, including the appearance of the first reptiles. Towards the end of the Carboniferous, the climate underwent a notable transition. The continued absorption of CO2 by rock weathering and organic sedimentation led to a decrease in greenhouse gases, causing a global cooling. This climate change led to the formation of ice caps in the southern hemisphere, marking the beginning of the Carboniferous glaciation, which extended over several million years. During the Carboniferous, the transition from amphibians to the first reptiles marked an essential step in the evolution of terrestrial vertebrates. This evolution was facilitated by significant morphological and physiological adaptations, allowing the first reptiles to free themselves from aquatic environments and colonize new terrestrial habitats. The transition from amphibians to reptiles did not occur overnight. It was a gradual process, spread over millions of years, during which populations of amphibians gradually acquired adaptations, allowing them to survive and reproduce in increasingly dry terrestrial environments. These changes were favored by the selective pressures of the time, notably the competition for resources and climatic fluctuations, which pushed certain species to explore and establish themselves in new ecological niches. Fossils of intermediate species bear witness to this evolutionary transition. Among them, Seymoria is often cited as an example of a tetrapod exhibiting both amphibian and reptilian characteristics. Traditionally, it is considered that all reptiles descend from a unique Permian genus, Seymoria, which exhibits intermediate characteristics between stegocephalians and reptiles. As a result, Seymoria occupies a pivotal position between amphibians and reptiles, to the extent that experts still debate its precise classification. Although primarily terrestrial, Seymoria retained anatomical features reminiscent of its aquatic ancestors, illustrating an intermediate step in the evolution towards reptiles fully adapted to terrestrial life. Their vertebrae offered a unique combination of flexibility and robustness to their spine, which gave them a significant advantage. The first two cervical vertebrae had evolved into the atlas and axis, allowing better mobility of the head. This adaptation was particularly useful for terrestrial animals, enabling them to better orient themselves, hunt mobile prey, and defend against predators. Their skeleton, notably that of the limbs and girdles, was completely ossified, giving them a solid structure. They had long, bony ribs, although these did not yet form a closed rib cage. Their limbs, more robust than those of their stegocephalian ancestors, allowed them to hold their bodies above the ground. The skulls of these animals had an occipital condyle, an articulation contributing to the mobility of the head. Some species, like Seymoria, still retain structures such as branchial arches, suggesting a link with their original aquatic environment. These species probably lived near bodies of water and could still have aquatic larval stages. One of the major adaptations of the first reptiles is their skin covered with keratinized scales. This thick, horny epidermal structure significantly reduces water loss through evaporation, providing effective protection against dehydration in terrestrial environments. Unlike amphibians, whose permeable skin requires humid habitats, the scales of reptiles provide a physical barrier against external aggressions and climatic variations. Another innovation is the development of the amniotic egg. Unlike amphibian eggs, which require a moist environment to avoid desiccation, the amniotic egg has a protective shell and several internal membranes, such as the amnion, which create an aqueous environment for the embryo. This configuration allows reptiles to lay their eggs on land without dependence on an aquatic environment for reproduction. Indeed, the amniotic egg protects the embryo from desiccation, provides nutrients, and eliminates waste, thus facilitating embryonic development in a terrestrial environment. Additionally, the first reptiles developed lungs more efficient than those of their amphibian ancestors, adapted to exclusively aerial respiration. This improvement allowed them to better exploit terrestrial habitats. As ectothermic animals, their body temperature depended on the external environment. This characteristic made them particularly sensitive to climate variations, influencing their behavior and geographical distribution. The first reptiles presented distinctive skeletal adaptations, such as a single occipital condyle connecting the skull to the spine, offering greater mobility of the head. Their robust spine and limbs, positioned laterally under the body, improved their terrestrial locomotion, giving them a more efficient gait to move on land. These characteristics allowed the first reptiles to free themselves from the constraints of aquatic environments, paving the way for successful diversification and colonization of terrestrial ecosystems. The evolution of reptiles spans nearly 320 million years, during which several distinct lineages have developed. Williston's proposed classification establishes these lineages based on the number and position of temporal fenestrae on the skull. First, the anapsid skull, characterized by the absence of temporal fenestrae, is found in turtles and primitive reptiles such as the cotylosaurs. Next, the diapsid skull, with 2 temporal fenestrae, is typical of the majority of reptiles, including dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and lepidosaurs, which have given rise to modern lizards and snakes. Additionally, the euryapsid skull, also called parapsid, features a small, high-positioned temporal fenestra and is found in Mesozoic aquatic reptiles, such as plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, and ichthyosaurs. Finally, the synapsid skull, with a single low-position temporal fenestra, is typical of mammalian reptiles. It was thought that the earliest reptiles had a solid skull, without lateral openings, except for the nostrils, eyes, and spinal cord. This type of skull is called a napsid, as we have just seen, and it is considered a primitive characteristic of the earliest reptiles. About 315 million years ago, a series of fossilized footprints discovered in Nova Scotia offers us a fascinating glimpse into the earliest land reptiles. These footprints, featuring typically reptilian toes and scale marks, are attributed to Hylonomus, considered the oldest indisputably known reptile. Hylonomus was a small animal, resembling a lizard, measuring between 20 and 30 centimeters, or 8 and 12 inches long. Its morphology indicated a perfect adaptation to terrestrial life, with an elongated body and skin covered in scales, offering protection against dehydration. Its many sharp teeth suggest an insectivorous diet, meaning it fed mainly on insects, which were abundant at that time. These fossil footprints bear witness to the evolution of reptiles, marking an essential step in the transition from amphibians to reptiles, fully adapted to life on land. Other examples of early reptiles include Westlothiana and Paleothyrus, which share a similar constitution and probably comparable habits. Although Westlothiana is sometimes considered a stem amniote rather than a true amniote, these species illustrate well the intermediate stages in reptile evolution. During the Carboniferous and Permian periods, 3 major families of reptiles emerged. The evolution of these groups followed different paths. The first to separate from the ancestral lineage were the synapsids, reptiles having lower temporal openings, bounded by the zygomatic, squamosal, and post-orbital bones. From the late Carboniferous, this group became dominant among the early amniotids. The anapsids, like Hylonomus, had a solid skull with no opening for jaw muscles, which limited their bite strength. The last lineage, the diapsids, possessed 2 openings on each side of their skull. These additional holes lightened the skull and allowed for the attachment of powerful muscles, making their jaw more efficient. This lightweight and versatile skull structure of the diapsids proved highly advantageous for evolution. It allowed for greater diversification and adaptation to different lifestyles, paving the way for a wide variety of reptiles, including dinosaurs and marine reptiles. These differences in skull structure played a key role in reptile evolution, influencing their success and dominance in the ecosystems of the time. The anapsid, synapsid, and diapsid reptiles followed very different evolutionary paths at the beginning of the Mesozoic era. Today, land and aquatic turtles are the only living descendants of anapsids, although the exact link between these reptiles is still debated among paleontologists. The synapsids, on the other hand, gave rise to 2 major lineages. The first is that of the pelycosaurs, now extinct, whose most famous representative is Dimetrodon. The second lineage, that of the therapsids, gave birth to the first mammals during the Triassic period. The pelycosaurs, in particular, were close to the cotylosaurs. Their fossils, discovered in North America and Europe, reveal animals resembling lizards, measuring between 1 and 2 meters or 3 and 7 feet, with biconcave vertebrae and well-developed abdominal ribs. Their teeth, lodged in alveoli, showed slight differentiation. In the Middle Permian, the pelycosaurs were replaced by therapsids, called theriodonts, or beast-teeth animals, which are more evolved. Their teeth were clearly differentiated, a secondary bony palate formed, and the skull's articulation with the spine changed to improve mobility. Their lower jaw was mainly composed of the dentary bone. The position of their limbs changed, with elbows directed backward and knees forward, placing the limbs under the body, as in mammals, rather than on the sides like reptiles. The diapsids were the next group to separate from the anapsid cotylosaurs. Their skull has 2 temporal openings, located above and below the postorbital bone. At the end of the Paleozoic, specifically in the Permian, the diapsids experienced great diversification, giving rise to many groups and species, among which are extinct forms and current reptiles. 2 main subgroups emerged among the diapsids, the lepidosaurs and the archosaurs. Paleontologists are not certain which of these subgroups appeared first, but they followed distinct evolutionary trajectories. Lepidosaurs include current reptiles like the tuataras, lizards, snakes, and chameleons, as well as their extinct ancestors. The tuatara, which today lives on small islands off the coast of New Zealand, descends from primitive lizards with wedge-shaped teeth, common in the middle of the Mesozoic. Primitive lizards were distinguished by wedge-shaped teeth on the jaws and palate, and by vertebrae concave on both sides, reminiscent of those of amphibians. Today, lizards, snakes, and chameleons form the order of squamates, one of the most diversified among reptiles. Lizards, present since the late Permian, share several similarities with the sphenodon, such as widely spaced limbs and an undulating spine. Snakes appeared later in the Cretaceous, while chameleons, a more specialized group, appeared in the Cenozoic, between the Paleocene and the Miocene. Archosaurs are among the most fascinating reptiles that have ever existed, including crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Today, only crocodiles have survived from this group. Emerging at the end of the Triassic, the first species of crocodiles were quite different from modern crocodiles. For example, those from the Jurassic did not have a true bony palate, their internal nostrils opening between the palatal bones, and their vertebrae were concave on both sides. Modern crocodiles, with a secondary bony palate and well-developed procolus vertebrae, descend from ancient archosaurs called pseudosuchians, present since the end of the Triassic. While most lived in freshwater, some marine species are also known among Jurassic forms. These evolutions allowed a great diversification of reptiles, enabling them to conquer various habitats and dominate ecosystems for millions of years. One of the earliest well-known reptiles is Mesosaurus, a genus from the early Permian, remarkable for having returned to aquatic life. It was long thought that Mesosaurus was one of the first marine reptiles. Unlike the majority of its terrestrial contemporaries, Mesosaurus had adapted to water and primarily fed on fish, showing early diversity in the lifestyles of reptiles. During this period, the earliest reptiles were largely overshadowed by much larger labyrinthodont amphibians, such as Cochleosaurus. These amphibians dominated the ecosystems of the time, restricting the ecological niche of reptiles to a small, discrete part of the fauna. It was only after the small glacial period at the end of the Carboniferous that reptiles began to diversify and occupy a more significant place in ecosystems, laying the groundwork for their future dominance on land. Towards the end of the Carboniferous, terrestrial labyrinthodonts were still present, but a new player was emerging, the synapsids. These gave rise to the first large, fully terrestrial vertebrates, the pelycosaurs, among which Adaphosaurus is one of the best known. It was a herbivorous reptile measuring over 3.5 meters or 11 feet long, with a short, low skull and blunt conical teeth, which lived in North America and Europe in the early Permian. These imposing animals, characterized by a distinctive dorsal sail, were well adapted to their terrestrial environment. In the middle of the Permian, the climate became drier, causing upheaval in the fauna of the time. Primitive pelycosaurs, which had dominated until then, were gradually replaced by therapsids, more advanced synapsids. Therapsids are the ancestors of modern mammals, and began to show traits that foreshadowed this evolution. Meanwhile, anapsid reptiles, recognizable by their massive skulls lacking post-orbital holes, continued to thrive. Among them, the PREHISTORs, robust herbivores, reached gigantic proportions before disappearing at the end of the Permian. These largest reptiles of the Permian had a length varying from 60 to 300 centimeters, or 24 to 118 inches, and some species could weigh over 1,000 kilograms, or 2,205 lawabes, and played an essential role in the ecosystems of the time. During the Permian period, PREHISTORs, a group of parareptiles, are considered the closest ancestors of turtles. They were covered with hard armor-like plates, and their slow and awkward gait is reminiscent of modern turtles. Contrary to what one might think, PREHISTORs were not dinosaurs. They belonged to a distinct branch of reptilian evolution. Their extinction later allowed dinosaurs to thrive. However, how the first ancestors of turtles appeared at the end of the Triassic remains a subject of research for scientists seeking to understand this interesting transition. Meanwhile, diapsid reptiles, featuring two temporal openings in their skull, began to diversify towards the end of the Permian. They split into two major lineages: the archosaurs, which would give rise to crocodiles and dinosaurs, and the lepidosaurs, precursors of modern tuateras, lizards, and snakes. At this time, archosaurs and lepidosaurs remained relatively small and inconspicuous, resembling lizards and occupying specific ecological niches. Scientists have recently discovered a new species of ancient reptile that fills a major gap in the history of dinosaur ancestors. This reptile, named Teleocrater, was a carnivore measuring between 2 and 3 meters, 7 and 10 feet long, with a long tail and an elongated neck. It moved on 4 sturdy legs and lived about 245 million years ago, at the beginning of the dinosaur era. Scientists have proven that Teleocrater belongs to the archosaur group. This discovery is essential because Teleocrater appears just after the split of archosaurs into two lineages, one leading to birds and dinosaurs, the other to crocodiles. This reptile sits on the bird branch and has features that help understand what the early ancestors of dinosaurs looked like. Unlike other smaller and bipedal ancestors, Teleocrater was larger, with a flexible ankle joint similar to that of crocodiles. It also had jaw musculature and rapid growth similar to that of dinosaurs. The fossils of Teleocrater have allowed paleontologists to better understand its role in dinosaur evolution, revealing that some dinosaur characteristics were actually present long before their appearance. This period of transition marked a turning point in the evolution of terrestrial vertebrates, laying the groundwork for the explosion of reptilian diversity that would follow, notably with the rise of dinosaurs during subsequent geological eras. However, the end of the Permian period was marked by the largest mass extinction ever recorded. While scientists continue to debate the causes, they agree on a major suspect: intense volcanic activity. For 1 million years, the heart of present-day Siberia was the scene of powerful volcanic eruptions, spewing colossal amounts of lava, reaching a thickness of 3,000 meters, 9,843 feet. These eruptions filled the atmosphere and oceans with toxic gases, possibly accompanied by acid rains, causing major ecological disasters. Earth's temperature soared, depriving the oceans of oxygen and leading to the extinction of 70% of terrestrial species and 95% of marine life. The vast sheets of solidified lava, known as traps, attest to the scale of these eruptions, covering Siberia with up to 4 million cubic kilometers, 966,000 cubic miles of lava. At that time, the planet was dominated by a supercontinent, Pangaea, and an immense ocean, Panthalassa. Around 235 million years ago, the evolution of archosaurs led to the emergence of pterosaurs, crocodilians, and dinosaurs, marking a major diversification among reptiles. Archosaurs, originally made up of thecodonts, separated from the Eosuchians towards the end of the Permian and reached their peak in the Triassic. This group of lizard-like creatures measured between 15 centimeters or 6 inches and 5 meters or 16 feet in length. Most lived on land, with hind limbs often longer than the front limbs, allowing them to move efficiently on solid ground. At the same time, another branch of thecodonts adopted a semi-aquatic lifestyle, giving rise to crocodiles at the end of the Triassic. These crocodiles diversified during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, occupying various aquatic habitats. Dinosaurs appeared in the fossil record as early as the middle of the Triassic, becoming the largest and most diverse group of reptiles ever to live on Earth. They included species of all sizes, ranging from small animals measuring less than 1 meter or 3 feet long to enormous creatures reaching nearly 30 meters or 98 feet. Some dinosaurs moved solely on their hind legs, while others walked on all fours. Some had feathers, horns, or enormous claws. Dinosaurs were present on almost every continent, occupying a wide variety of environments. They lived in deserts, forests, and swamps, and some even adopted a semi-aquatic lifestyle. It is undeniable that during the Mesozoic, this group of reptiles dominated the Earth. The appearance of dinosaurs was very varied, but they shared certain common traits. For example, their heads were relatively small compared to their bodies. Another interesting characteristic is that in the sacral region of their spinal cord, there was a local expansion, often more voluminous than their brain. Dinosaurs are the only reptiles to have an upright posture, meaning that their legs are positioned under their body, unlike modern reptiles like crocodiles or lizards, which have their limbs on the sides. Although there are other skeletal differences between dinosaurs and other reptiles, they are less obvious. However, one particular bone, called the furcula, is easy to spot. The furcula, known among birds as the wishbone, is actually the result of the fusion of the clavicles. For a long time, it was believed that this bone was unique to birds, but today we know it already existed in some dinosaurs, notably theropods. This shows that birds simply inherited this bone from their dinosaur ancestors, proving their kinship with them. From the beginning of their evolution, dinosaurs split into two main groups that evolved in parallel. This distinction is based mainly on the structure of their pelvic girdle, which led to their classification into two categories: the Saurischia, or lizard-hipped, and the Ornithischians, or bird-hipped. The Saurischia were originally relatively small predators. Their hind legs allowed them to propel themselves quickly, while their shorter front legs were mainly used for grasping food. A long, sturdy tail provided essential balance, helping them stabilize during their movements. Over time, this group evolved to include impressive herbivorous forms walking on all fours. Among these giants were some of the largest vertebrates ever to have lived on Earth. The Brontosaurus, for example, reached a length of about 20 meters or 66 feet, while the Diplodocus could measure up to 26 meters or 85 feet. These immense creatures likely lived in terrestrial environments, feeding on the abundant vegetation found in marshes and near bodies of water. Their massive size allowed them to defend against predators and adapt to a primarily plant-based diet. On the other hand, the Ornithischians, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, derived their name from the shape of their pelvis, reminiscent of modern birds. Initially, these dinosaurs moved on long hind legs, but over the course of evolution, many developed proportionally adapted front limbs, allowing them to walk on all fours. Unlike the Saurischia, Ornithischians were exclusively herbivorous, specializing in various types of vegetation. Notable representatives of the Ornithischians include the iguanodon, which could move on its hind legs and reach a height of 9 meters or 30 feet. Another fascinating species is the Triceratops, similar to a rhinoceros, with a small horn at the tip of the snout and two large horns above the eyes. Its size could reach 8 meters or 26 feet long, and these horns were probably used for defense and territorial combat. The Stegosaurus, on the other hand, was distinguished by its relatively small head compared to its body and its two rows of high, bony plates adorning its back. This dinosaur measured about 5 meters or 16 feet long. The Stegosaurus's plates, often interpreted as means of thermal regulation or defense, added a spectacular dimension to its appearance. These two groups, the Saurischia and the Ornithischians, illustrate the incredible diversity of dinosaurs and their adaptation to different lifestyles over the millions of years during which they dominated the Earth. The earliest fossil traces of dinosaurs found in South America are Saurischia, a group that includes species like Saturnalia, Herrerasaurus, Staurikosaurus, Eoraptor, and Alwalcaria, having lived between 220 and 232 million years ago during the early late Triassic. These dinosaurs were bipedal carnivores, measuring up to 5 meters or 16 feet long. They were the first representatives of their group, and their morphological characteristics distinguished them from other reptiles of the time. These oldest dinosaurs had vertical limbs, a posture that offered them superior mobility compared to quadrupedal crocodilians with lateral limbs. This increased mobility allowed them to better hunt and escape from predators. Their warm-blooded metabolism also favored a more active life. These advantages might explain their rapid proliferation during the Mesozoic. The classification of these primitive dinosaurs is complex. It is only with the dinosaurs of the late Triassic that scientists can clearly differentiate two major subgroups, the theropods and the sauropodomorphs. Theropods are primarily carnivorous and are characterized by hollow bones and 3 fingers at the ends of their limbs. They were mainly bipedal, giving them great mobility. Although often associated with large predators like the famous Tyrannosaurus rex or Velociraptor, a study conducted by American paleontologists revealed that the majority of theropods were actually herbivorous. Out of 90 species analyzed, many showed anatomical adaptations related to a vegetarian diet, such as a toothless beak. The size of theropods varied considerably. Some, like Anchiornis, measured about 30 centimeters or 12 inches long and weighed 110 grams or 4 ounces, while others, such as Spinosaurus, could reach lengths exceeding 15 meters or 49 feet. This diversity in size reflects a variety of lifestyles and ecological niches occupied by theropods. Moreover, theropods also showed great diversity in their dietary habits. While the earliest representatives were mostly carnivorous, some groups evolved towards omnivorous, insectivorous, herbivorous, or piscivorous diets. For example, Spinosaurus specialized in fishing, while others, like Maniraptora, had a more varied diet. A notable feature of theropods is the presence of feathers or similar structures in several genera, suggesting a close relationship with modern birds. This hypothesis is reinforced by shared traits such as the 3-toed foot, furcula, and hollow bones. These similarities indicate that current birds are the direct descendants of some small theropods from the late Jurassic. Meanwhile, sauropodomorphs are a clade of Saurischia dinosaurs that appeared at the end of the Upper Triassic, around 230 million years ago. They are distinguished by several notable anatomical features. Their head was relatively small compared to the rest of the body, positioned at the end of a long neck composed of 10 or more cervical vertebrae. This configuration allowed them to reach vegetation at height, offering them a unique ecological niche among the herbivores of their time. Their dentition was adapted to a herbivorous diet, with leaf-shaped or spoon-shaped teeth. Instead of chewing their food, they used gastroliths, or swallowed stones, to grind plant fibers in their stomach, thus facilitating digestion. The first sauropodomorphs, such as Saturnalia, were small, measuring about 1.5 meters or 5 feet long. Over time, some members of this clade evolved to become the largest terrestrial animals to have ever existed, reaching lengths of 30 meters or 98 feet or more, and masses exceeding 60 tons or 66 tons. Initially bipedal, sauropodomorphs gradually adopted quadrupedal locomotion as their size increased, developing a gait adapted to their massive size. Their long tails served as a counterbalance to their elongated neck, thus ensuring their balance. Fossils indicate that some sauropodomorphs lived in groups, suggesting gregarious behavior. This herd life could have offered protection against predators and facilitated access to food resources. These primitive dinosaurs, nevertheless, bore resemblances to another major group of dinosaurs, the ornithaceans, even though their skeletons had notable differences, particularly in the pelvis and skull areas. Ornithaceans, like Triceratops and Stegosaurus, had a pelvis different from Saurischia, often adapted to a herbivorous diet. After the establishment of the major families of dinosaurs in the early Jurassic, evolution followed its natural course. However, recent research shows that by the end of the Cretaceous, the rate of dinosaur adaptation had significantly slowed. At that time, dinosaurs were mostly related to existing families, and their rates of speciation and diversification had decreased. This reduction in diversity may have made them particularly vulnerable to the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, known as the Cretaceous Tertiary Extinction or Crisis. Most Mesozoic reptiles were highly specialized, and their survival depended on very specific living conditions. This extreme and unilateral specialization likely contributed to their extinction. Although extinctions occurred throughout the Mesozoic, the phenomenon became particularly pronounced at the end of the Cretaceous, when the majority of these reptiles disappeared in a relatively short period of time. If the Mesozoic is often called the Age of Reptiles, the end of this era could just as well be named the Age of the Great Extinction. 65 million years ago, a massive meteorite crashed into the Yucatan Peninsula. This explosion generated gigantic clouds of ash, blocking sunlight, which led to the disappearance of the majority of plants. At the end of the Cretaceous, intense volcanic activity resulted from the collision between India and Asia. The significant reduction in vegetation led to the extinction of herbivores, followed by that of carnivorous dinosaurs. This massive extinction coincides with major climatic and geological changes. The Cretaceous saw significant redistributions of land and sea, accompanied by movements of the Earth's crust that led to vast mountain-forming phenomena known as the alpine phase. At the same time, the Mesozoic flora, dominated by conifers and cycads, was replaced by angiosperms, a new type of flowering plants. Genetic changes in the reptiles themselves cannot be ruled out. These transformations affected the survival capacity of species, particularly those that were highly specialized. Ironically, just as the Permian-Triassic extinction paved the way for the emergence of dinosaurs, the Cretaceous Tertiary extinction paved the way for the rise of mammals. These, which coexisted with dinosaurs as small, mouse-like creatures, were then able to evolve and occupy new ecological niches, left vacant by the disappearance of dinosaurs. $400 million years ago, during the Devonian period, lobe-finned fishes made an evolutionary leap by colonizing the land in the form of amphibians. Their descendants then spread across all continents and even conquered the sky. However, some chose to return to their original environment, the water, thus becoming secondarily aquatic animals. They had to readapt to aquatic life. Independently of each other, they developed similar adaptations as the sea, their new habitat, imposed universal constraints. The first to return to the sea were reptiles, reaching their peak in the Mesozoic era. Climatic upheavals and the disappearance of many competing species following the Permian-Triassic crisis offered reptiles a unique opportunity to thrive in the oceans. The vast marine expanses of the Triassic, emptied of their biodiversity, turned into attractive ecological niches, prompting some terrestrial species to return to the sea. Reptiles were the first to seize this opportunity, notably thanks to the extinction of placoderms, those armored fish with powerful jaws. In the immense ocean surrounding Pangaea and the Tethys, its inner sea, many marine predators appeared. Among these newcomers, two major groups diversified from the beginning of the Triassic: the ichthyosaurs, also called fish reptiles, whose fossils reveal sizes ranging from less than 3 feet to over 66 feet, and the sauropterygians, or fin lizards. These two groups thrived in the seas until the mid-Cretaceous, playing an essential role in the marine ecosystems of their time. In just a few million years, these marine reptiles adapted to the demands of aquatic life, developing streamlined bodies, transforming their limbs into swimming paddles, and adjusting to salinity and diving conditions. Within these revitalized marine ecosystems, these reptiles coexisted with a diverse fauna including fish, sharks, cephalopods, echinoderms, and bivalves. Meanwhile, on land, another group of reptiles was on the rise, colonizing the ground and the skies. Ichthyosaurs were the first pelagic reptiles, fully adapted to life in the open sea, far beyond the shores of Pangaea. The first ichthyosaurs appeared in the early Triassic, around 250 million years ago, and quickly spread across the globe. The Triassic marks the period of greatest ecological diversity for these creatures, ranging from fish hunters to benthic feeders. During the Jurassic, pelagic species evolved, becoming capable of fast swimming and diving to great depths. Ichthyosaurs were typical pelagic predators, inhabiting the vast marine expanses. Their fossils have been discovered all over the world, notably in the Volga region in Russia, where interesting specimens have been found. Ichthyosaurs were the marine equivalents of today's cetaceans during the Mesozoic. Over the course of their evolution, ichthyosaurs took on various forms, but all shared common characteristics adapted to predation in the open sea. Their body became streamlined, their skeleton less dense, and their snout elongated. They hunted fish, marine reptiles, and cephalopods, like ammonites. Their streamlined body, large eyes adapted for underwater vision, and their metabolism are notable examples. They swam by undulating their bodies, especially the tail, while their fins were used for steering. Their resemblance to dolphins is striking: a streamlined body, an elongated snout, and a large fin with 2 lobes. Their limbs transformed into fins, while their hind legs and pelvis diminished. Their fingers had numerous phalanges, and some ichthyosaurs had up to 6 fingers. Their skin was smooth. Being endothermic, meaning warm-blooded, they could maintain a stable body temperature, allowing them to hunt in cold waters without relying on the sun to warm them. Their eyes, which could reach 25 centimeters or 10 inches in diameter, provided excellent vision in the dark depths. Ichthyosaurs also had a crescent-shaped tail fin and a fleshy dorsal fin, reminiscent of modern cetaceans. However, they are not related to dolphins, which descended from terrestrial mammals. Unlike many reptiles, ichthyosaurs were viviparous, meaning they gave birth to live young rather than laying eggs. This adaptation was necessary because their bodies did not allow them to return to land to lay eggs. Depending on their size, they occupied different ecological niches. The majority fed on small fish and cephalopods, with their teeth being long, thin, and pointed. During the Triassic, certain species specialized in benthic animals, mainly mollusks. From the Jurassic onwards, ichthyosaurs with broad, straight teeth appeared, capable of hunting large fish and other marine reptiles. Their natural enemies included sharks, pliosaurs, and crocodilomorphs. During the Cretaceous, the diversity of ichthyosaurs declined, with only a few large predators remaining until their extinction after the Cenomanian-Turonian crisis 94 million years ago. Their disappearance could be due to competition with other marine predators and environmental changes in the Upper Cretaceous. Furthermore, plesiosaurs are an order of marine reptiles belonging to the Sauropterygians. The first fossils of plesiosaurs date back to the Upper Triassic, about 203 million years ago. This group thrived during the Jurassic, with a great diversity of forms. Plesiosaurs are distinguished by a broad, barrel-shaped body with flippers and a short tail. Their skin was smooth, without visible scales, but had folds and wrinkles. One of their defining characteristics is their long neck and small head. The elongation of the neck was due to the number of vertebrae rather than their size, as in the giraffe. The Elasmosaurus holds the record with 76 cervical vertebrae. The neck of plesiosaurs was rigid and did not allow for swan-like bending, contrary to some earlier reconstructions. The size of plesiosaurs ranged from 1.5 meters or 5 feet to over 12 meters or 39 feet, with the Elasmosaurus reaching up to 15 meters or 49 feet. Plesiosaurs frequented both coastal waters and the open sea and were present in all regions, including polar waters. In the past, some theories suggested they laid eggs on land, but recent discoveries instead support viviparity. The newborns were large, generally 1 or 2 per litter, and it is possible that plesiosaurs exhibited a form of parental care in their early stages. Their diet consisted of fish and cephalopods. Their long neck may have helped to conceal their approach to a school of fish, as the small size of their head was not perceived as a threat. Plesiosaurs are also known for the presence of gastroliths in their stomachs, stones used as ballast or to grind the shells of mollusks. In the Cretaceous, giant species like the Elasmosaurus appeared, but the order began to decline. The few species that survived the Cenomanian-Turonian extinction 94 million years ago had to face strong competition from mosasaurs. Plesiosaurs eventually disappeared at the end of the Cretaceous. Furthermore, plesiosaurs are a group of plesiosaurs characterized by a short neck and a large, elongated head. They do not form a single taxon, but group representatives of different families sharing this distinctive morphotype. Like all plesiosaurs, plesiosaurs had a robust body, limbs transformed into flippers, and a short tail. What sets them apart is their shortened neck and massive head. For example, the Kronosaurus had a skull 2.8 meters or 9 feet long, representing 1/4 of its total length of 12 meters or 39 feet. Plesiosaurs used the same underwater swimming technique as plesiosaurs, but their more compact body, due to the shortened neck, increased their speed. When they attacked, the powerful and synchronized movement of their 4 flippers allowed them to propel rapidly towards their target. The analysis of their bone structures suggests they could dive to considerable depths to hunt. Plesiosaurs were as widespread as plesiosaurs, but unlike the latter, they were super predators at the top of the food chain. Their large conical teeth and powerful jaws were designed to tear muscles and crush bones. At the end of the Cretaceous, mosasaurs, in rivalry with sharks, became the main marine predators. The first mosasaurs measured up to 1.5 meters or 5 feet, while species like Mosasaurus hoffmanii could reach 17 meters or 56 feet. Mosasaurs had a long, streamlined body, similar to that of a monitor lizard, but with a proportionally larger head. Their limbs transformed into flippers were short, and later species had a long tail with a forked fin. Initially, mosasaurs swam by, undulating their bodies side to side, like traditional reptiles. With evolution, they adopted a more effective swimming style for fast-moving sea dwellers, thanks to powerful tail strokes, more flattened with a fin. Although they could achieve speeds higher than pliosaurs, they remained slower than ichthyosaurs. They could dive deep, but preferred shallow waters. These marine reptiles occupied niches of large and medium-sized predators, living in the shallow coastal seas worldwide. Their diet included sharks, large fish, sea turtles, other reptiles, and occasionally ammonites and belemnites. However, the catastrophic changes in the biosphere at the end of the Cretaceous led to the destruction of marine food chains, leading to their extinction as well as that of other large predators. Thalattosuchians, or marine crocodiles, are the only archosaurs, aside from marine birds, to have fully adopted an aquatic lifestyle. This group includes 2 families, the teleosaurs and the Metriorhynchus, which descended from them. Marine crocodiles lived mainly in the shallow seas of Western Europe, although fossils have been found in Argentina and Madagascar. They became extinct in early Cretaceous, just like the ichthyosaurs. Teleosaurs were less adapted to aquatic life, retaining a crocodilian appearance. They had a carapace made of bony plates covering their back and belly, limbs still resembling legs with webbing between the toes, and a long, robust tail. Their size generally ranged from 3 to 4 meters, or 10 to 13 feet, reaching up to 7 meters or 23 feet. However, Metriorhynchus were entirely adapted to aquatic life, having lost their carapace, transformed their legs into flippers, and developed a caudal fin. Their sizes ranged from 1.5 to 6 meters or 5 to 20 feet. Teleosaurs swam using their legs and undulating their bodies, with the tail playing the main role in propulsion. They might still have been able to move on land for short periods. In contrast, Metriorhynchus had completely abandoned terrestrial living, using their tail and fin for propulsion and their flippers for steering. Their long, narrow jaws and pointed teeth indicate they primarily fed on small fish. Teleosaurs had not yet completely severed their link with the land and could still lay their eggs there, while Metriorhynchus were presumably viviparous. Marine turtles include several families of turtles not directly related, but all having adopted an aquatic lifestyle. Most current marine turtles belong to the Chelonidae family, while the Dermacales family, represented by a single species, includes leatherback turtles. The Protostygidae family, closely related to leatherback turtles and some other families, are now extinct. The first marine turtles appeared at the end of the Jurassic and experienced significant diversification during the Cretaceous. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, 66 million years ago, had little impact on them, perhaps due to their feeding habits and long reproductive cycles, which helped them survive this difficult period. Marine turtles retain a major trait of their terrestrial ancestors, the shell. In Chelonidae, it is streamlined, oval, or heart-shaped. In contrast, in Protostygidae and leatherbacks, the shell is greatly reduced, composed of bony plates forming ridges and covered with thick skin instead of the horned scales. Their limbs and large heads are not hidden under the shell. The size of marine turtles varies, most measuring about 1 meter or 3 feet long, although the largest, like the leatherback turtle, reaches up to 2.5 meters or 8 feet. Archelon, an extinct species, was even more imposing, measuring 4.6 meters or 15 feet long and weighing about 2 tons or 4,409 lbs. Marine turtles mainly use their long front flippers for movement, allowing them to perform motions similar to flying birds. Their rear flippers act as rudders. Although their speed is moderate, they are very maneuverable. These turtles can spend extended periods underwater, staying active for up to an hour underwater, and diving 4 to 7 hours during sleep. Their diet is omnivorous, primarily composed of algae, mollusks, crustaceans, echinoderms, coelenterates, and sometimes sponges. The leatherback turtle mainly feeds on jellyfish but may eat other animals. Extinct turtles like Archelon had similar diets. The main threats to these turtles come from sharks and formerly marine reptiles such as mosasaurs or pliosaurs. Among all the marine reptiles of the Mesozoic, turtles have proven to be the most resilient in the long term. Around the middle of the Triassic period, pterosaurs, or flying lizards, evolved from thecodonts. Scientists consider Scleromochlus to be the ancestor of pterosaurs. This slender reptile, about 18 centimeters or 7 inches long with a thin body, had long legs. It spent a lot of time in the trees and was capable of walking on 2 or 4 legs and jumping. It is possible that it had a membrane similar to that of a flying squirrel. Pterosaurs spread widely during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, colonizing the skies with a great diversity of species. These winged reptiles are a fascinating example of the specialization of reptiles during the Mesozoic era. These flying creatures had a unique structure. Their wings were formed by folds of skin, stretched between the sides of the body, and an extremely elongated fourth finger on their forelimbs. This configuration is one of the most unique adaptations in the animal kingdom for flight. Their sternum was wide and featured a well-developed keel, similar to that of birds, serving as an attachment point for the powerful flight muscles. Many bones in their skeleton were pneumatic, or hollow, to lighten their weight while ensuring the necessary strength for flight. The jaws of pterosaurs were often elongated and equipped with teeth, although there were variants with a toothless beak. The flying reptiles of the early Triassic and Jurassic periods are traditionally classified under the name Rhamphorhynchoidea, unlike the more advanced pterodactyloids of the Cretaceous. Rhamphorhynchoids largely retain the characteristics of their non-flying ancestors, with low skeletal pneumaticity, toothy mouths, long tails, and generally the absence of head crests. Their wingspan, relatively short, usually measured less than 2.5 meters or 8 feet. Their bodies were covered with hair-like pycnofibers, suggesting a warm-blooded metabolism. In the middle of the Jurassic period, Rhamphorhynchoids diversified, forming 3 distinct types of ecosystems. The first type, probably the most archaic, includes terrestrial and aerial predators like Dimorphodon. These pterosaurs spent a lot of time on the ground, on branches, or in rocks. They were able to climb easily and run after their prey, and they had large, short wings, as well as robust jaws and teeth. Their diet included various small animals, ranging from insects to amphibians, lizards, and mammals. The second type encompasses hunters of flying insects, capturing their prey in flight. Although they were not particularly fast, they were very agile. Among them were the Anurognathidae, round-headed pterosaurs with large eyes that primarily hunted at night. The third type consists of piscivorous creatures living near the shores of water bodies. These graceful pterosaurs, like the genus Rhamphorhynchus, had long wings, narrow jaws, and needle-shaped teeth. They captured fish and cephalopods by snatching them at the surface of the water or diving into the depths. From the middle of the Jurassic period, the Rhamphorhynchidae began their decline, and by the end of the Cretaceous period, only a few residual species survived. At this time, the pterodactyloids were already in direct competition with birds. The latter could not be completely ruled out, but the birds did not hesitate to occupy the niches left vacant by the reptiles. The pterosaurs then began to increase in size. This size difference allowed them to coexist in the same ecosystems without directly competing. Throughout the Cretaceous, a wingspan of 2 meters or 7 feet constituted the upper limit for birds and the lower limit for most pterosaurs. This shift towards larger sizes also triggered changes in their environment. Pterosaurs specialized in fishing survived, but were now hunted by pterodactyloids with a wingspan of 5 to 7 meters or 16 to 23 feet. Pteranodons, by folding their long wings, dove at high speed into the marine depths. Nyctosaurus, sporting a crest 1 meter or 3 feet long, captured fish at the water's surface with their fine teeth. These piscivorous pterosaurs were common inhabitants of coastal areas and inland waters, living alongside seabirds like Ichthyornis and Hesperornis. The group of land-air predators also experienced significant changes. These pterosaurs, now active in open spaces, hunted on the ground and near bodies of water. Some, like the Tsungaripteridae, fed on mollusks and crustaceans in the coastal area, crushing their shells with their powerful teeth, a rare feature among pterodactyloids. Others, like the Osteodactylidae, flew in groups searching for carrion like vultures. There were even filter feeders like flamingos, feeding on small crustaceans and plankton. But most notably, the pterosaurs of the Ajdarchidae family stood tall as giants. At the end of the Cretaceous period, they reached extreme sizes for flying creatures. Specimens like Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx, the largest of the family, had a wingspan of 10 to 12 meters or 33 to 39 feet. With their long necks, enormous heads, and pointed beaks, they spent almost more time on the ground than in the air. Quetzalcoatlus, with a wingspan of 9.6 meters or 31 feet and a length of 8 meters or 26 feet from head to hind leg, appeared like a winged giraffe when on the ground. Like giant hornbills, they roamed the fern savannas, and in case of danger, deployed their great leathery wings to take off. In summary, it can be said that the anatomy, biomechanics, and aerodynamics of pterosaurs were all aimed at a single goal: flight. Despite their evolutionary success, pterosaurs gradually declined with the arrival of birds, which seem to have occupied similar ecological niches. This decline led to their extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, along with non-avian dinosaurs. It is important to note that pterosaurs and birds followed independent evolutionary trajectories, although they share ancestors among the various families of thecodonts. The Permian Unatosaurus, considered the ancestor of turtles, was a small lizard-like animal with short and very wide ribs, forming a sort of dorsal shield, but lacking an abdominal shield and possessing teeth. Mesozoic turtles were initially terrestrial and probably burrowing before some groups adopted an aquatic lifestyle, leading to a partial reduction of their bony and horny shells. Since the Triassic, turtles have retained their main features, surviving challenges that eliminated most reptiles and remain as prosperous today as in the Mesozoic. Modern cryptodiaries and pleurodires largely preserve the primitive appearance of Triassic terrestrial turtles, while marine and soft-shelled turtles appeared at the end of the Mesozoic. Modern reptiles, except for turtles often referred to as anapsids, are primarily diapsids, a group characterized by two temporal cavities in their skull, a lower one for synapsids, an upper one for parareptiles and eurapsids, and two for diapsids. The anapsid group includes a variety of reptiles, including the lepidosauromorphs, a subgroup that gave rise to tuataras and squamates. The lepidosaurs, a specific subset within the vast clade of lepidosauromorphs, have a very fragmented fossil record, with few well-preserved fossils between their estimated origin around 260 million years ago or 161 million years ago, and the end of the Jurassic around 150 million years ago or 93 million years ago. This knowledge gap represents one of the greatest enigmas of vertebrate evolution. It leaves us with almost no clue about the origin of these reptiles, which play a major role in current and past terrestrial ecosystems. However, a recent discovery in Argentina has allowed paleontologists to find the most primitive known lepidosaur to date, called Taitalura. This fossil represents a transitional form between early reptiles and modern lepidosaurs. Taitalura is considered the ancestor of the two main groups of lepidosaurs, the squamates, like lizards and snakes, and the sphenodontians, like tuataras. Analyses show that the bodies of early lepidosaurs resembled more closely primitive sphenodontians, while squamates evolved more diversely. This diversity may have contributed to the evolutionary success of lizards and snakes compared to sphenodontians. Interestingly, all known fossils of squamates, sphenodonts, and their close relatives have been discovered primarily in Europe, while Taitalura was found in Argentina. This suggests that primitive lepidosaurs migrated over great distances, crossing the vast expanse of Pangaea. They coexisted with the first true lizards and sphenodonts for about 20 million years, or 12 million years, indicating a more complex evolutionary history than expected. By the end of the Permian, squamates, a group including lizards and later snakes, had separated from primitive diapsids. They began to diversify during the Jurassic, between 200 and 146 million years ago, or between 124 and 91 million years ago. This group experienced great diversity and rapid expansion, especially in the Cretaceous. Early snakes evolved from lizards during the Middle Jurassic, around 174 to 163 million years ago, or 108 to 101 million years ago. The golden age of squamates occurred during the Cenozoic, where they became the dominant reptile group, now representing the majority of living reptiles. This development of lepidosauromorphs, particularly of squamates, marked an important step in reptile evolution, leading to the great diversity we observe today. These adaptations enabled them to adjust to various environments, from arid deserts to tropical forests, contributing to their persistent evolutionary success. By the end of the Cretaceous, two new classes of warm-blooded vertebrates had already emerged, mammals and birds. The large specialized reptiles that had survived until this time failed to adapt to changing living conditions. The increasing competition with birds and mammals, smaller but more active, also contributed to their extinction. These new vertebrates, with their warm blood, high metabolism, and more complex behavior, quickly gained importance. They adapted efficiently to changing landscapes, conquered new habitats, exploited new food sources, and exerted increased competitive pressure on less active reptiles. The Cenozoic era that followed saw birds and mammals dominate the terrestrial fauna. Among reptiles, only a few groups survived. The squamates, lizards and snakes, relatively small and mobile. Turtles, protected by their shells, and a small group of aquatic archosaurs, the crocodiles. Today, Reptiles include various groups such as turtles, crocodilians, snakes, and lizards, with about 10,000 identified species. Turtles number about 340 species, crocodilians 23, snakes nearly 3,000, and lizards over 4,000. These reptiles play an essential role in ecosystems. They regulate prey populations, control pests, participate in pollination and seed dispersion, and serve as indicators of ecosystem health.
Previously, we saw the Paleozoic, meaning ancient, then the Mesozoic, meaning middle. Now we come to the Cenozoic, which could be defined as recent. This period, which continues to this day, began in the aftermath of the dinosaurs some 66 million years ago. Cenozoic, meaning recent life or new life, comes from the Greek kainos, new, and zo, life. This gives you an idea of the new departure in biodiversity during this period. The Cenozoic is divided into two major systems. The first is called the Paleogene and includes the Paleocene, Eocene, and Oligocene. Next comes the Neogene, which comprises four periods: the Miocene, the Pliocene, and finally, the Quaternary Era, which includes the Pleistocene and the Holocene. Geographically speaking, things have changed and had a major impact on climate, and by extension, flora and fauna. Pangaea is no more, and continental drift continues. Gondwana land is increasingly fragmented, cracking on both sides. Australia drifted northwards, while Antarctica took its place at the South Pole. The detachment of Australia and Antarctica and the creation of the Drake Passage led to a significant cooling of our planet. As a result, the climate is noticeably colder in some places, while in others it is warmer and wetter. Towards the end of the Paleogene, during the Oligocene, sea currents also changed, particularly near South America and the Antarctic. Indeed, when these two continents were joined, warm currents bathed the sides of Antarctica. These currents provided a warm climate for a rich jungle to flourish. But when the Antarctic broke away, it offered a passageway to the colder marine currents. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current is born. It brings Antarctica's deep, cold waters to the surface. Little by little, 33 million years ago, it became a veritable continent of ice. To sum things up, at the beginning of the Cenozoic, some continents broke away, others gradually dried up, and new land masses appeared, notably in northern Africa and Europe, which were once archipelagos. During the Eocene, India and Eurasia collided, closing the Tethys Sea. Elsewhere on our planet, geological upheavals continue. The Atlantic Ocean, for example, has settled comfortably between Europe and North America. The subduction of the Pacific Plate beneath the Americas is causing the Sierra Nevada and the Andes to rise. These changes are not insignificant. Biodiversity is closely linked to geological and climatic factors. Continental migrations, ocean closures and openings, and other tectonic upheavals have consequences for climate. The planet is warming. It's getting warmer, but it's also getting wetter. If the milder temperatures of the Paleocene allow plants to develop and expand their territory, like our famous ferns we met earlier, the humid tropical climate of the Eocene is a real springboard for the development and diversification of vegetation. Interestingly, the diversification of these plants can be compared with that of mammals. To give an order of magnitude, there are around 31 species of mammal at the beginning of the Paleocene. These animals took advantage of their strengths to survive, but also of the ecological niches left vacant after the disappearance of the dinosaurs. These are not surviving species that simply escaped the global catastrophe, but new species. New leaf eaters that didn't exist before and are gradually taking over. By the end of the Eocene, there were almost 120 species of mammal, 4 times as many as just a few thousand years earlier. Even flying mammals such as bats were present. The ascent is therefore meteoric. The mainstay of this ascent is plants. As soon as they diversify, they open up new evolutionary opportunities, unexplored ecological niches. In the space of 700,000 years, a tiny period of time on the scale of life on Earth, flora grew exponentially and above all diversified. Flowering plants, seeds, nuts, legumes, and even the first vegetables provided a varied diet that enabled many species to specialize. Some mammal species even went from weighing less than 600 grams to over 50 kilograms or 110 pounds in the same period. When we speak of the Mesozoic, we mean the era of the dinosaurs. The Cenozoic era, on the other hand, could be seen as the era of mammals, as they managed to find their place on our planet during this period. However, it should not be assumed that mammals were the only species living on planet Earth during this pivotal period. Reptiles, as well as birds and giant birds in particular, were also major groups to populate the land during this same period. The Cenozoic is divided into 3 major systems: Paleogene, Neogene, and Quaternary. A few years ago, the Paleogene and Neogene were grouped together under the term Tertiary era, but in view of recent discoveries, this has fallen into disuse and remains less appropriate than the Paleogene and Neogene, which stand for Old Genus and New Genus respectively. Let's begin our journey in Paleogene territory. The era stretches from 66 million years ago to around 23 million years ago. This era is itself divided into sub-periods, so that we can better grasp the different evolutions over the 40 million years it defines. We speak of the Paleocene, then the Eocene, and finally the Oligocene. Welcome to the very first period of the Paleogene, the Paleocene. The vegetation of this period is quite similar to that of a tropical rainforest. Made up of giant trees 40 meters or 88 feet tall, this forest is home to sassafras walnut and even tropical chestnut and sequoia trees, which are colonizing more and more territory. Beneath these giants are smaller trees and shrubs such as ficus, palms, and of course our famous tree ferns. The ground was covered with ferns, such as this asplenium, providing shelter for many species, but also allowing many insects to proliferate. In the marshy areas bordering the lake, the vegetation is a little different, with typhas, reeds, and water lilies, for example. There are also a few tall trees, such as cypress and nyssa. In other, more arid zones, the first cacti make their first appearance. Plant cover diversifies according to climatic conditions and geographical zones. Little by little, new species take the place of plants less able to survive and develop. But, like any self-respecting ecosystem, climate, flora, and fauna are closely linked. So it's only natural that fauna should adapt, specialize, and diversify as plants evolve. Of course, many mammals were present in the Paleogene. In fact, they were the dominant group in the Cenozoic, despite the large number of birds and insects. In fact, the Cenozoic is often referred to as the Golden Age of mammals or the Golden Age of therians. The term mammal is well known, but therian is less so. It defines and groups together the three main types of mammal found on our planet. We speak of eutherians for placental mammals, metherians for marsupials, and prototherians for monotremes. The monotremes, like the platypus, are the most unusual mammals in the therian group. It's a mammal, but strangely enough, it lays eggs. Let's take a look at some placental mammals first. They come in all shapes and sizes, as you'll see. There are small quadrupeds like this Propaliotherium, ancestor of the horse, barely 60 centimeters or 24 inches at the withers, as well as large mammals like this one, which weighs in at around 2 tons and is almost 4 meters or 13 feet long. It's an Uintatherium. If Uintatherium has generous measurements to say the least, this animal, of the Dinocerata group, also known as Uintatheres, was originally much more modest in its lineage. Early species measured just 175 kilos or 390 pounds. That's a lot, but not much compared with the 4,000 kilos or 8,800 pounds of muscle it now displaces. At that time, you could also have met a Phenacotus. It's probably one of the oldest ungulates known today, about the same size as our present-day tapirs. But we'll come back to the ungulate group a little later. First, let's look at the mammal group in the broadest sense. There are 3 types of mammals: placentals, marsupials, and monotremes. From the Paleocene onwards, the rise of mammals has been quite meteoric. 2 lineages quickly emerge within the group: the creodonts, which generally led to carnivores, and the condylarthras, which led to herbivores and omnivores. Phenacotus, which we've just seen, is one of the condylarthras. Its teeth are adapted to chewing plants. If you take a closer look at its feet, you'll see that it has 5 toes on both front and hind legs, each fitted with a small hoof. During the same period, but not sharing the same environment, you could have come face to face with a coryphodon if you had ventured into the marshes of Europe, China, or even North America. It feeds on aquatic plants. The coryphodon is very impressive, yet it too is a herbivore. Its musculature and jaw are impressive. 500 kilos or 1,100 pounds for 2.5 meters or 8 feet in length. Are such prey safe with such an imposing body mass? No, not necessarily. It all depends on the predator and its capabilities. A carnivore 14 meters or 46 feet long, 80 centimeters or 31 inches wide, weighing up to 1.5 tons, with a 40 centimeter or 16-inch cranium, and razor-sharp teeth could take on such prey. Titanoboa sarajonensis meets all these requirements, unfortunately for our coryphodon. Living near rivers in present-day Colombia, it is the most imposing snake the world has ever known, feeding on giant freshwater turtles and even nearby crocodiles. That's not to say that the only real predators worthy of the name were reptiles. In the Paleocene, there were many other dangers faced by terrestrial herbivores. While many mammals are still vegetivores, granivores, or insectivores, there are some pretty impressive carnivores in their group too. Arctocyon is a fine example of the transition between these two regimes. The size of a large dog, it weighed up to 50 kilograms or around 110 pounds. Equipped with robust molars for crushing and powerful masticatory muscles, it is able to tear off leaves and chew efficiently. Yet it has impressive tusks visible on the mouth side. Are they canines? Nothing is less certain, but scientists believe that this rather unspecialized animal probably had an omnivorous diet, and it is assumed that it was in the process of switching from a carnivorous to a vegetarian diet. Other mammals with a similar silhouette had a meat-only diet. These are the Mesonychians. They are nicknamed hoofed wolves. Their nickname is very telling. They have the silhouette of a wolf but are equipped with 5 fingers. Then, as they evolve, with 4 fingers ending in small hooves. They were very good runners and walked on their fingers. Native to Asia, they quickly established themselves as formidable predators. Dissacus, a genus descended from the Mesonychians, gradually spread to Europe and even North America. Another genus, Ankylodon, ventured as far as New Mexico and was the size of a bear. Dissacus was closer to the size of a jackal. Like the other genera of the Mesonychian group, his dentition became increasingly differentiated and efficient. It has modified molars for shearing, slender lower molars for shredding, and sharp teeth for slicing. Andrewsarchus mongoliensis can also be found on the plains, weighing 400 kilos or 880 pounds, and measuring around 4 meters or 13 feet long, and nearly 2 meters or 7 feet at the withers. It was a very impressive predator. Later, Megistotherium osteophlastus, a member of the group that appeared in the Miocene, was even more charismatic and dangerous, weighing up to 800 kilos or 1,800 pounds depending on the source. Mammals adopt different diets, morphologies, and environments. Their diversity is great. As early as the beginning of the Eocene, the second period of the Paleogene, we can even see flying mammals. The bat in question is Violacea sige. Taking advantage of caves for shelter, it fed on insects. What's really interesting about this bat is its ability to maneuver in flight. While far from being able to perform the feats of some of today's birds or even bats, it was nonetheless very gifted for a group of recently flying mammals. Paleogene birds, on the other hand, were not always gods of the skies. On the contrary, some enjoyed the land far more than the air. Mammals may have diversified greatly and are quite numerous in the continent, but they are far from being the only tenants of our planet. Giant birds, some of them also known as terrible birds or terror birds, have largely earned their place on Earth. Just a few million years ago, pterosaurs dominated the skies. The Cretaceous-Paleogene biological crisis having passed, things have changed quite a bit since then. With flying reptiles gone, an ecological niche remained. It was the dinosaur avians who would evolve into birds that would fill the gap. Many of them took to the skies, but a few preferred life on the ground. Birds underwent an incredible radiation during the Cenozoic. Several groups and families underwent a meteoric rise. First of all, there are the Gasternithids, which we'll talk about in greater detail later on, which are large land birds. Then there are the Plotopteridae, which are large seabirds. Then there are what we might define as primitive penguins, but also Pelagornithids, Bronthornithids, and Phorusrhacids. It's the latter that will be nicknamed the terror birds. While some birds are herbivores, Phorusrhacids are not. They are even reputed to be super predators. Unable to fly, they measure up to 3 meters or 10 feet in height, and can weigh up to 200 kilos or 440 pounds. These terror birds live in South America. One of the largest is Titanus whalleri, but it arrived on Earth a little later in the Neogene. These birds established themselves slowly but surely during the first part of the Cenozoic, but it was during the second part that they were at their most fearsome. Before reigning terror in South America, these flightless super carnivores were found elsewhere in the world. The oldest known Phorusrhacid, Lavocatavus, is thought to have been found in Africa. Scientists are still investigating the reasons for this possible migration. Eleutheronus, also relatively large, could reach 1.5 meters or 5 feet in height, and was found in Europe, notably in France and Switzerland. Let's take a look at 2 other very characteristic birds of the period, which don't belong to the Phorusrhacidae group, but to the Gasternithidae. The first is a giant bird called Gastornis, while the second is Diatrema. Gastornis is very tall, around 2 meters or 7 feet. It doesn't fly, but it runs. Its diet has long been the subject of debate. It has to be said that given its silhouette, scientists were keen to count it among the predators, and yet its morphology left a few doubts. In the end, it was Delphine Angst and Eric Buffetade, 2 specialists in paleontology, who succeeded in demonstrating through their various studies that it was indeed a plant eater. As for the second, Diatrema, You're probably thinking that they're eerily close in physical terms. Well, you're absolutely right. To tell you the truth, they're even the same animal. In fact, back when prehistoric animals were first discovered in the 1800s and 1900s, on more than one occasion, two different scientists described and named similar dinosaurs. Sometimes they were closely related dinosaurs, but of different species. For others, like Gastornis and Diatrema, they were indeed the same animal species. Over the years, the name Gastornis has stuck. Let's leave the birds for a moment and get back to some reptiles. Apart from our famous Titanoboa, others also crisscrossed the world's continents and waters during the Paleocene. Many reptiles disappeared after the Cretaceous, including flying and marine reptiles. But a few groups managed to establish themselves more permanently. These include crocodiles, snakes, lizards, and turtles. Here, in this Paleogene region close to bodies of water, we can admire animals, such as this Diplocynodon, part of the Alligatoridae family, or this Eoconstrictor snake. At the end of the Paleocene, temperatures soared. We're talking an extra 8 degrees Celsius, or 14 degrees Fahrenheit. This is enormous. Many species will not survive this turnaround. This fracture will lead to a so-called minor extinction. Although not on the scale of the end of the Cretaceous, for example, it nevertheless marked a new turning point for flora and fauna. This episode marks the end of the Paleocene and the beginning of the Eocene. Temperatures fell again for most of the rest of the Cenozoic, even leading to an ice age at the end of the period. During the Paleogene, the seas continued to recede, and new land appears again and again. When we look at the planisphere, we see that the position and shape of the continents increasingly resemble what we know today. India comes into contact with the Eurasian plain, and the Tethys Ocean is partly closed. This marks the beginning of the Himalayas, one of our highest and most beautiful mountain ranges. Further north, Greenland also broke away from Europe. Other animals appeared during the Eocene and Oligocene. Predatory mammals like Andrewsarchus mongoliensis. It is one of the largest carnivores of the Eocene plains. It can grow to 4 meters or 13 feet and weigh around 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. Other bats have also joined the family, such as the Archaeonycteris lasmicedon, undoubtedly a carnivore. And then there are groups that were already present, but which managed to conquer an ever-expanding territory at the expense of other species, such as rodents. In the living world, it's all a question of adaptation and survival. When a species fails to adapt, it becomes extinct. This is what undoubtedly happened to the multituberculates, and what served the cause of the first rodents to become established. These small mammals, like those of the Cryptobatar genus, hopped about like gerbils. They were omnivorous and had teeth quite similar to rodents. Scientists believe that the disappearance of the multituberculates is linked to their competition with rodents. Both groups occupied the same ecological niche. As rodents are equipped with hypsodont and chisel-like incisors, they seem to have fared better than multituberculates. Without this key evolution, multituberculates would have disappeared from the landscape. Apart from rodents, we're also seeing more and more lagomorphs, i.e. rabbits and hares. But the great revolution of the Eocene was undoubtedly the appearance of the primate lineage. They were quite similar to our present-day lemurs. The canopy has become much richer and more diverse over the last few thousand years. There are more and more deciduous trees, but also flowering trees, and above all, fruit trees. And yes, let's not forget that angiosperms, i.e. flowering plants, have developed considerably and expanded their territory. All this food is a godsend for these primates, who make their home high up in the trees. The first mammals capable of climbing trees had to come down to feed. But there are plenty of predators down there. To offset the danger, some mammals developed finer motor skills in the trees, but also found food in them to increase their chances of survival. Their vision becomes sharper, their legs become hands, an opposable thumb appears, they gain balance. In short, they colonize the trees and offer themselves an impregnable kingdom in the heights, thanks to new physical abilities. As far as we know, Purgatorius is probably one of the oldest representatives of our primate ancestors. This small animal lives in North America. The one hanging over our heads is a Darwinius macillae. It belongs to the Notharctidae family and comes to us from Europe, in Germany. Notice the opposable thumb. As you can see, their morphology is quite similar to that of today's lemurs. Slender, and agile. Eocene primates found in Asia, Africa, and North America already display most of the group's typical features: prehensile feet, binocular vision, and nails instead of claws. Most Eocene primates, especially those from Eurasia and North America, belong to several groups, the most important being the Notharctidae and Omomidae. Many primates will disappear after the Eocene, at least most of the taxa native to North America and Europe. The surviving taxa will be of Asian and African origin. Some Eocene mammals are particularly important for the rest of our history. Pocacetus, for example, is probably a distant ancestor of whales. Yes, despite what you might think, the ancestor of this enormous aquatic animal actually lived on land, not in the ocean. Hyrocotherium is also an emblematic animal of the Eocene, whose genealogy led to animals we still know well today. Hyrocotherium is thought to be one of the most distant ancestors of the horse. Propaliotherium and Paleotherium followed. Arsinoitherium would be related to our present-day elephants, although I agree that it looks a lot like rhinoceros. The distant relative of rhinoceroses would be this one, Megacerops, a brontoteran. In the same group, the brontotheroids also include Embolotherium, with its nasal horn and 2.5-meter withers. Both belong to the Perissodactyls, i.e. ungulates with an odd number of digits, such as horses, rhinoceroses, and tapirs. Conversely, those with an even number of digits include bovids, cervids, giraffids, camelids, and, incredible as it may seem, cetaceans. Megacerops, on the other hand, has an odd number of toes and is therefore a perissodactyl, like horses and tapirs. Speaking of tapirs, here's a member of the Tapiridae, Lophiodontidae, whose typical representative is Lophiodon, a close relative of today's tapirs. During the Oligocene, grasses became increasingly abundant, and a few small meadows appeared on the horizon. This was an environment that had not previously existed on Earth. Ungulates, or hoofed mammals, were the first to colonize this new ecological niche. Several species of Rhinocerotidae, Equidae, and Chalicotheriidae are found in Europe, Asia, and even North America. In Europe, these are mainly Chalicotheriidae, such as Chalicotherium. It measures around 2.5 meters or 8 feet in length and weighs no less than 350 kilograms or 770 pounds. In North America, it's the equids that are evolving quite markedly. New forms are appearing, such as Mesohippus, which is becoming increasingly similar to today's horse. We can see that not only its silhouette has evolved, but also its skeleton. The premolars are molariform. This makes it easier to crush even tough leaves. In Asia, rhinocerotids are particularly abundant. Paraceratherium, for example, is one of the species that took up residence in Asia during the Oligocene. These large herbivores are beginning to reach some pretty impressive sizes, this one reaching 5 meters or 16 feet in height, and no less than 15 tons. Not all of them have such dimensions, however, and there are many smaller rhinocerotids developing in the region. The development of grasslands and the expansion of flowering plants also served another animal group, insects. By the Cretaceous, numerous groups had already emerged. Beetles, such as beetles and ladybugs, could already be observed at this time. There were also Diptera, which we often like a little less because of their sting, as in the case of the mosquito. The last to arrive were the Hymenoptera, including bees and wasps. This little world is about to welcome newcomers, the Lepidoptera, which includes butterflies. During the Oligocene, we meet up with our Pakicetus again. Well, not quite. We're going to meet one of its descendants. And as you can see, this one has already returned to the water. We're talking about Ambulocetus. His name means the walking whale. This gives you an idea of some of its present and future characteristics. Ambulocetus, like Himalayacetus and Indocetus, is able to take advantage of both terrestrial and aquatic environments, as was once the case for certain amphibians. This evolutionary perspective may have its origins in the emergence of new land masses and the gradual retreat of the sea in these Eurasian regions. A little further out to sea, we may also come across a Cotylochore. The Cotylochore is a type of dolphin that is physically very similar to our modern-day dolphins. In fact, according to scientists, Cotylochores, like them, were probably capable of echolocation. But these marine mammals aren't the only ones in the water. There are large predators to be wary of. In the waters of the Paleogene, over a period of almost 25 million years, chondrichthyans, cartilaginous fish like the shark, dominated the world's waters. With the great diversity of actinopterygians, i.e. ray-finned fish, these great predators were spoilt for choice when it came to their menu. Food galore, hunters inevitably thrive, and sharks find themselves at the very top of the food chain. But that doesn't stop the few marine mammals that thrive beneath the waves. Descendants of Ambulocetus and other primitive whale congeners, for example, continue to evolve. Towards the end of the Oligocene, Basilosaurus appeared. He belongs to the Archaeocete group. Far from the image we have of a marine mammal, it was once considered a reptile. Scientists named it Basilosaurus saurus, referring to its reptilian condition. It has to be said that its silhouette is almost identical to that of a snake. Yet many years after its discovery in 1834, study of its skeleton showed not only multi-rooted teeth and a single jawbone, characteristic of mammals. What really confirms the diagnosis, however, are its forelimbs, which truly characterize it as a marine mammal on a par with whales. In fact, it is a descendant of Pakicetus and Ambulocetus. This 20-meter or 65-foot-long cetacean is a much feared predator in the area. It has sharp, deadly teeth. In the marine world, there are much smaller forms of life. Particularly those belonging to the Foraminifera family are also developing, completing the food chain. Foraminifera include Nummulidae and Alveolinidae. Now it's time to leave the Paleogene and see what awaits us after, the Neogene. As we have just seen, the Paleocene was marked by many changes, both geographically and biologically. The end of the Paleocene marked the beginning of a new era for terrestrial flora and fauna. The Neogene begins on the Miocene. A number of geological changes continued. The face of the Earth gradually changed, even though this new geographical facet began several million years ago. The planet continued to cool, and the Antarctic continent became covered in ice. At the end of the Pliocene, pack ice even appeared at the North Pole. Then, during the Neogene, land routes began to take shape, inexorably impacting biodiversity. These routes brought South America into contact with North America through the Isthmus of Panama, Eurasia with Africa, the closing of the Tethys Ocean, which later became the Mediterranean Sea, and the appearance of the Strait of Gibraltar. These new contacts led to migrations, but also to competition. Yet another minor biological crisis was already on the horizon. At the end of the Neogene, some species become extinct, unable to adapt to new territories or to compete, while others diversify and expand their territories. Marsupials and placentals will be the big winners in this new adaptation. These changes, combined with the isolation of certain continents, apart from Europe and Asia, which remain united, led to the development of environments, fauna and flora specific to each continent. In South America, predators are limited to animals belonging to the marsupial or giant bird groups. Primates thought to have originated in Africa are also present. In North America, the evolution of equids continues apace. From the first horse, Hyracotherium, to the only surviving genus Equus, height at the withers increases progressively. Another evolutionary characteristic of equids is their feet. At first, only 3 of the 4 toes were preserved. Then a single toe became the hoof. At first, they eat soft food, such as buds or young leaves. Then their teeth evolve to better crush grasses and rougher leaves. Let's go back 23 million years to the very beginning of the Neogene to understand why this period of history was so enriching for biodiversity, both on land and at sea. Still in the Cenozoic era, after having traversed the Paleogene, we now continue our journey into a new era, the Neogene. It began 23 million years ago and ended 2.5 million years ago. Like the Paleogene before it, this system is also subdivided into different periods to better understand the 21 million years it defines. The Miocene, the first period of the Neogene, corresponds to the major part of this period, spanning the first 18 million years. It is divided into 6 stages. The following 3 million years correspond to the Pliocene, with 2 stages. Many other surprising and impressive animals await us during the Neogene. Before meeting them, let's take a look at their environment and the characteristics in which they evolved. Continents broke away from each other. New lands emerged and temperatures dropped throughout the period. Depending on the geographical zone, warmer and wetter environments appear, while others are colder. Geographically speaking, with less than 23 million years separating us from our present era, the position of the continent seems very close to the usual continental configuration we are all familiar with. If we're a little more observant, we can see that there are still a few small points that are far from settled. Greenland, for example, is not yet covered by its Neogene ice mantle, nor are the continents of South America and North America yet connected. After this brief geological and climatic overview, let's take a look at how flora and fauna evolved during the Neogene. After taking a dip in the ocean, here's the landscape you might have discovered during the Miocene, the first period of the Neogene. Although some species differ, you'll no doubt recognize the large families that live here around you. There are corals and sponges, algae, mollusks, arthropods, and lots of fish. As we saw during the Paleogene, ray-finned fish diversified greatly, providing an important ecological niche for many predators. Since the beginning of the Cenozoic, marine reptiles have no longer been the main beneficiaries, but chondrichthyans, cartilaginous fish, and in particular primitive sharks. They were already present in the ocean 300 million years earlier, as early as the Devonian for the oldest and the Permian for the so-called modern sharks, i.e., well before the dinosaurs. However, they were not in a position of strength and faced stiff competition. First with large arthropods such as eurypterids, then with Mesozoic marine reptiles, veritable sea monsters. During the Cenozoic, however, competition diminished, if not to say became virtually non-existent. They can evolve at will. And it's not the most impressive of them all, having inspired cinema's greatest sea terror, who will say otherwise. Is it worth introducing the monstrous megalodon? The Otodus megalodon shark is a member of the Otodontidae family. This impressive and intriguing family emerged after the Cretaceous crisis. It is therefore very recent, yet no less evolved and specialized. Megalodon live in shallow marine areas and warm waters. Other species, notably pinnipedomorphs such as this, Enaliarctos, are also making their grand entrance into the marine fauna. It could be the origin of the pinniped genus. It had a short tail, developed muscular limbs, and webbed feet for swimming. It was already well adapted to the aquatic environment, with vibration-sensitive whiskers, an inner ear capable of hearing underwater, and large eyes. However, this carnivore probably had to consume its meal on the surface, as its dentition, notably its sharp carnivorous teeth, did not allow it to do so in the water, so it went to the beach to enjoy the fruits of its hunt. Apart from the megalodon, these animals could come across other predators just as frightening as they were impressive, but they weren't out of the woods yet. Another large predator sailed here and there in search of prey to sink its teeth into. Leviathan melvillei is a sperm whale measuring around 15 meters or 50 feet in length, with a skull alone measuring 3 meters or 10 feet in length. Apart from its impressive length, you can see that its skull is heavily armed with a battery of teeth over 30 centimeters or 12 inches long, enough to make any prey that crosses its path shudder. Unlike today's sperm whales, which gobble up giant squid, the Leviathan devoured whales. During the Paleogene era, we mentioned another family, the cetaceans. By the time we left, this family was slowly but surely evolving. So what happened to them afterwards? To give you a little clue, scientists often refer to the cetacean era when they talk about the Miocene. As you can imagine, this was an extremely positive time for this group. Like the mammals before them, the cetacean order underwent such a rapid growth in species that 2 lineages were soon established. On the one hand, the Odontocetes, the toothed cetaceans, and on the other, Mysticetes, the baleen whales. The Odontocetes, or toothed whales, include dolphins, sperm whales, and orcas, which feed on fish, birds, and even a few mollusks. Mysticetes, with their filtered baleen plates, have a more restricted menu, generally limited to krill. The first Mysticetes, however, are more likely to have teeth than baleen plates, even if a lineage differentiation is already apparent. This is the case of Lanocetidae, Etiocetidae, and even Gangicetus, which date from the Oligocene. During the Miocene, Ebalenoptera could be observed, but it was in Piscobalena that the baleen plates were most clearly visible, as well as in Titanocetus. Now it's time to go back up to the surface to see how vegetation and fauna have continued to evolve. The Paleocene was also a pivotal period in the history of mammals. In a short space of time, they diversified and specialized, growing from a few grams to several hundred kilos. Some even went from being vegetarians to omnivores or carnivores. Initially, it was plants, among other things, that provided the springboard for such evolutionary radiation. Although their presence on the planet is still very important at this precise time, they are not alone. In addition to birds, they include numerous reptiles and a host of insects of all kinds. This new diversity in the world of plants and insects further encouraged the diversification of certain existing Paleogene groups, notably the herbivorous, granivorous, and frugivorous mammals of the heights, with a great period of evolutionary radiation in monkeys and bats. On land, too, mammals still have the monopoly. The biggest predators, apart from the terror birds of South America, are mostly mammals. Some of them can be quite surprising. The warthogs we know are generally more prey than predator. However, in the Miocene, it wouldn't have been a good idea to come across Entelodonti. With its imposing size, it could rival a bull in terms of mass and power. The largest of its kind, Entelodon magnus, could reach 2 meters or 7 feet at the withers, and was probably close to a ton of muscle. But its most impressive feature was its jaw. Like all mammals, its dentition is differentiated, so it has an armada of teeth in its mouth, enabling it to take on any prey in its hunting territory. It is tall on its feet and reputed to be a good runner. Scientists are unsure whether he was a carnivorous hunter, a scavenger, or a bit of both. In view of his build, power, and sharp teeth, we're tempted to think of him as an outstanding predator and the perfect hunter. However, some scientists are more inclined towards the opportunistic scavenger hypothesis. It's true that some of its teeth are perfectly shaped for crushing bones, making it the ideal scavenger. In any case, it remains an impressive predator. Just a few meters away lives the Hyaenodon, which isn't very friendly either, to be honest. As for its diet, this time the scientists are positive. It's a carnivore, and a very good predator at that. Weighing up to 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds, it is muscular, with powerful legs and 5 toes, armed with sharp claws. The long, narrow jaws were powerful and used for biting, neck-breaking, crushing, and crushing. With its 8 razor-sharp teeth, it rarely lost a fight with its prey. Other, lesser predators were just as agile and powerful in Europe and Asia. Sansanosmilus, for example, is a member of the Barbariphelidae family, weighing around 80 kilos or 180 pounds, with relatively short but powerful and muscular legs. Homotherium was a member of the saber-toothed feline family, made famous in prehistoric films and cartoons. Saber-toothed felines are known as Machaerodontinae, weighing up to 250 kilograms or 550 pounds and reaching 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the withers. These felines were quite powerful and impressive. The incisors and lower canines formed a powerful piercing device. Once the prey was caught in the predator's powerful jaws, there was no chance of escape. It also has long, slender legs, and it seems a very large nasal opening. This means it had a fast and efficient oxygen supply, and its legs were formidable when running. Elsewhere on the globe, predators were of a very different kind. In South America, marsupials and terror birds still have a monopoly on the territory. Among carnivorous marsupials, boar hyena comes to mind. With its long, powerful neck and jaw with sharp, jagged teeth, it was an impressive hunter. Its name echoes the hyena, as the front of its body, notably the head and long neck, are reminiscent of this opportunistic African predator. Australohyena, also a member of the Sparassodonta group, had a short snout, strong canines and molars for crushing. It was one of the largest predators in its environment, weighing up to 70 kilos or 155 pounds. It must have been able to break bones just like hyenas. Lycopsis longirostrus can also be mentioned in the same genus. Among giant birds, we can turn to Phorusrhacos to learn more about this group. He is considered one of the largest predatory birds ever to have existed. He belongs to the group known as terror birds, which also includes Titanus and Kalenkin. Porus racos measures around 2.5 meters or 8 feet in height and can weigh up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. The most striking feature is its beak. It's huge and above all, hooked. To help him in his hunt, he also had a pair of claws on his wings and long legs that enabled him to run, according to scientific estimates, at up to 65 kilometers per hour, or 40 miles per hour. Kalenkin was even bigger, reaching a height of 3 meters or 10 feet. His head alone was 7 centimeters or 3 inches long. He had the same physical prowess as his fellow, Porus racos, namely the speed and weapons to take on prey such as rodents, reptiles, and even small mammals. As we have already seen, with the end of the Paleogene and the beginning of the Neogene, flora and fauna became increasingly differentiated according to region and location. Climate, but also the isolation of certain continents, plays a part in this specialization and these different radiations. Traveling around lakes and forests during the Miocene, here are some of the animals you might have come face to face with. Some are calm and peaceful, others fierce predators. Several members of the rhinoceratid family lived in the Bosnia-Herzegovina region, including Brachypotherium brachypus, Lartetotherium sanseniense, Placiacarotherium balcanicum, and Hispanotherium. A litokoala can be seen high in the forest in Australia. Towards the end of the Miocene, as we shall see, some land masses dried up. Eucalyptus forests, on the other hand, expanded. This is undoubtedly what led one of the genera to specialize its diet, with these trees in particular. Still in Australia, what could be likened to a muskrat also lived. This was Acaultidata, a strict carnivore unless it was omnivorous. A few fossilized remains do not allow us to define its diet with any certainty. Another forest animal, Pliopithecus. Pliopithecus is a monkey, a type of primate physically quite similar to the gibbons. Unlike gibbons, however, it had a very short tail. It is found in Asia, but also extensively in Europe. According to some studies on fossils found, our Pliopithecus may have been able to swing from tree to tree thanks to its long arms, rather than relying solely on the dexterity of its hands and opposable thumbs. When an animal uses this tree-to-tree swinging technique, it is said to be able to branch out. This is a major turning point for primates as they become increasingly agile at heights and can thus protect themselves from terror birds and other ferocious predators below. Speaking of canopies and tree climbing prowess, another animal, this time from South America, lived in the river plains close to the forests. We're talking about the giant sloth. In view of its size and weight, it was probably not, as today's sloths are, capable of living in trees. Several species of giant sloth lived in South America during the Miocene. Megalonyx is one of them. It had powerful claws for clinging to trees and, above all, pulling food towards itself. Megatherium was over 6 meters or 20 feet long and probably weighed almost 3 tons. The advantage of his claws, but above all of his height, was the food he could reach. Very few vegetarians could reach such a height. so he could occupy an ecological niche without worrying too much about competition. A little less tall, but just as impressive, is Erametherium laurelardi. It measured 2 meters or 7 feet at the withers, but when it stood on its hind legs in search of food, it displayed 5 meters or 7 feet of robust muscle and bone structure. Still among the predators, but a little more generous in size this time, we can also observe in North America, Europe, and even Asia, Machairodus, a saber-toothed feline, Ichtherium, which belongs to the hyenas, and Amphicyon. Amphicyon is a subtle cross between a bear and a dog. Probably omnivorous, it had powerful paws and a thick neck like a bear, but a broad tail and wolf-like teeth. It could reach 600 kilograms or 1,300 feet, making it a predator high up on the food chain. In Eurasia, it was able to prey on species such as Dicroceras, a small cervid measuring 70 centimeters or 28 inches at the withers. It is the oldest known antelorid cervid. On the plains of Africa, certain mammals began to grow in size, especially the genus Proboscideans. Dinotherium is one of them. It is considered to be the largest land mammal ever to have walked the earth. According to sources and descriptions, Dinotherium could have measured around 3.7 meters or 12 feet in height, and weighed between 10 and 14 tons for the largest males. One of the main differences between Dinotherium and our modern elephants is its trunk, which is shorter, and its tusks, which are not attached to the maxillae, as is the case with elephants today, but to the mandible, i.e. the lower jaw. In Europe and North Africa, Archaeobelodon was a genus of proboscideans smaller than our elephants. Even so, it weighed between 2.5 and 3.5 tons. Closest to the water is a hexaprotodon. This genus groups together a large number of extinct species of hippopotamus. The main common feature that gave the genus its name is the jaw. These animals have 3 pairs of fairly pronounced incisors. Not to be confused with the rhinoceratid species we encountered earlier, which could also share the same environment, notably swampy forests and somewhat drier open plains. In the fresh waters, it was not uncommon to see an Ischirorhynchus. This freshwater dolphin belongs to the Platanestidae family, the river dolphins. Our little tour of the different environments of the Miocene is coming to an end. Why subdivide the Neogene into 2 parts, given that one of them was only 3 million years old? Even though it's relatively short, it's still very important. To begin with, we need to look at the Earth's temperature and dryness. The climate became colder and colder, and forests gradually gave way to savannas and grasslands. This process had already begun during the Miocene, but became much more pronounced during the Pliocene. This drastic change in the landscape had a significant impact on the fauna. The drying up of the land is very violent. The Tethys Ocean, for example, disappeared completely, replaced by a white desert of salt. The sea loses up to 1 meter per year, with all the direct and indirect consequences this entails. This episode is known as the Messinian salinity crisis. In addition to these climatic and geological upheavals, there's the evolution of a particular group, and above all the emergence of a new genus during the Pliocene, that is of great importance to mankind. Who are we talking about? If I answer Tomai, does that give you any idea? Around 7 million years ago, a primate close to the origin of the human lineage was discovered. Measuring 1 meter or 3 feet in height, it was bipedal and belonged to the hominid family. It shares many of the characteristics of the hominins, i.e. the subtribe comprising the hominids and the genus Homo. If we study dentition carefully, we can see that tooth enamel thickness is between that of the pangenus, i.e. chimpanzees, and that of Australopithecus. Another important fact in the evolution of this new lineage is bipedalism. According to its skeleton, in the presence of the foramen magnum, the spinal column was upright, implying possible locomotion on the 2 hind legs. Evolution towards the Australopithecine, Kenyanthropus, and then towards the Homo genus is underway. Humanity is in the process of being born, here in Chad. Tomai took his first steps on 2 legs here, on the outskirts of Toros, Manala, in the Jorab Desert. 7 million years ago, the landscape was very different from the one you see today in this part of Africa. A forest had grown up around the edge of the lake. In this forest, you could find tall trees, shrubs, and leguminous plants. Nearby, a savanna landscape could also be seen. Proboscideans, ungulates such as giraffids or equids, and bovids enjoyed the area, when saber-toothed felines such as Machairodus or hyenids were not around. To understand the appearance of Tomai, we need to go back in time. 16 million years ago in the Miocene, the Ponginae, the Asian lineage of orangutans, separated from the Homininae, the Euro-African lineage of gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. Less than 10 million years later, Tomai upset the established order of the Homininae. The latter diverged into 2 new lineages, the Paninae, or chimpanzee lineage, and the Homininae, or human lineage. Sahelanthropus chidensis led the lineage to Orrorin taganensis, a hominin aged 5.9 million years, then a little later to Ardipithecus cadaba, aged 5.8 to 5.5 million years. The lineage continued to evolve over the millennia. Around 4.2 million years ago, Australopithecines made their appearance, with Australopithecus anamensis, the oldest known of the genus. Then, 3.2 million years ago, in present-day Ethiopia, Lucy entered the human story. This Australopithecus afarensis turned the scientific world upside down and shook all the beliefs we had previously held about this lineage. Based on in-depth analysis of the fossil remains, it would appear that Lucy was 25 years old. The fossil is quite complete, with around 40% of the bones recovered. This provides a sufficiently precise picture of the genus to which she belongs. The discovery was made by a project involving some 30 Ethiopian, American, and French researchers, co-directed by paleoanthropologist Donald Johansen. He was accompanied by geologist Maurice Taib, artist and paleontologist Claude Guillemot, paleontologist Yves Coppens, and student Tom Gray. A few years later, just 4 kilometers away, drowned in the Awash River, the skeleton of a 3-year-old child named Salam, meaning peace, was also unearthed. These Australopithecines lived in present-day Africa 3.2 million years ago at the end of the Pliocene. Lucy evolved in this savanna environment. Able to live both on the ground and in the trees, she was also able to move into the rainforest so necessary for feeding. Grasses, succulents, insects, and perhaps even a few small animals completed her daily menu. It is possible that one of these Australopithecus species was the origin of the Homo genus, which appeared in Africa between 3 and 2 million years ago. Studies and research are continuing on this subject. Our journey ends on this African landscape and the new hope of the name Lucy. The rest is just the beginning of a new page for mankind and the story of a new journey.